helps if you hit the button. All right, 6 o'clock, Mr. Mayor, we're live and ready to roll.
Before we do the pledge, can I do something about Flag Day tomorrow?
Certainly. We're good to go?
Yes, sir.
All right, good evening, and thank you for everyone who's joined us for this Thursday, June 13th Riverside City Council work session. I want to call the meeting to order at 6:01. And before we rise to pledge allegiance, I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Denning.
Okay. Hang on. I just wanted to go over why June 14th is Flag Day. Flag Day is a holiday celebrated on June 14th in the United States. It commemorates the adoption of the flag of the United States on June 14th, 1977 by resolution of the Second Continental Congress. And I just wanted to get that out there so that people understand why we have Flag Day every year. And I don't think, they go up and people kind of go up, well, why do we have a Flag Day today? And the point is that our forefathers saw fit to, this is our flag, and it says, hold on, give me a second, that the flag of the 13 United States be 13 stripes, alternate red and white, and that the Union be 13 stars, white in a blue field, representing a new constellation. And as we have added more states in the United States, we've added more stars every time. And so I think it's important for everybody to understand that. That's all. Thank you.
All right.
Can I give a shout out to the J.C.'s? Because I've been asked, and I brought him a check tonight, but people want to know how you get the flag in your yard. And you get the flag in your yard if you get hold of the J.C.'s. And they put them up, take them down at all the appropriate times.
And if you look on an existing flag, there is a sticker on there that tells you where to go, what the website, and what phone number to call if you want one. And we'll be more than happy to come out, and it's only Thursday. Tomorrow is Flag Day, so we can still get you can still get flags in your yard for tomorrow.
So a little advertisement.
All right, and with that being said, if you're able to, please join us and rise to pledge allegiance to that very flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Here?
Mr. Denning?
Here.
Ms. Fry? Here. Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Present.
Mayor Williams?
Here. No excused absent members tonight to excuse. Mr. Manager, any additions or corrections to the agenda as presented?
No, not for me, Mr. Mayor.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Lomach and a second from the Deputy Mayor to approve the agenda as published. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Agenda is approved. We'll move right into our monthly updates, and I'll turn it back over to the City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will start with an update from the Police Department, and I will turn it over to Chief Robinson.
Thank you, sir. Well, as you know, we start pretty early around here planning for National Night Out, and it's going to be an ongoing thing as I keep moving forward. Obviously, we're looking to have something as much like last year, maybe a little bit better. We're out there currently with, so if you have anybody who wants to contact us, you can either Officer Toscani, myself, or Major Jackson are kind of heading it up this year to get everything squared away. I'm sure I'll be continually giving you updates as we go along.
What is the date of that again?
It's August the 2nd.
What?
Is it the second?
It's the
Sixth.
6th, August
Sorry,
6th.
6th.
Yeah, it's not the second.
Bingo.
More importantly, who's cooking hot dogs that night? Is it the chief?
Always.
Okay. Making sure the grill master's there.
I had to cook hamburgers, hot dogs last Friday.
It's true.
It's true. Must be my thing.
It's an important job.
It is, it is. As you know, we haven't been here since last month, but the school ended. I just wanted to make sure we get a very good shout out to Nick Descani for the job he did this whole year, and he continues to do throughout summer. There's so many things planned. You'll see those tomorrow in my update that I give to the city manager to give out to you tomorrow. You'll see a lot more of those things. I didn't want to do all of them tonight because my list have been like 10 or 12 long. You know how that goes. I get long-winded. So you'll see those tomorrow, but just a shout out to him for the job he did this year, and also to thank the school, Chad Wynn himself, and for the and also the city, of course, you all for giving the support for him this year. It was a good year for us, and he really did a really good job in there. Just an unfortunate update on one of our new cruisers that we got this year. It had some issues right off the bat. I didn't know if it was it was mechanical, and we thought it was electrical. We just had a lot of issues with it. We sent it back actually took it down to the dealership. They actually put a whole new transmission in, thinking that's what it was, and it was not it. So one of the brand-new 2024s are not on the road still today. So one good thing about that is we did contact Enterprise, and they are not charging us the monthly fee for that car until it actually gets on the road. So we did get that squared away. But hopefully we'll get that done. We knew from the very beginning, once it had the first initial issue, I'm like, this car's a lemon, and something's got to be done. So Enterprise, I think, has taken the ball and kind of running with it for us and stuff like that. So we'll get it squared away, and when we get that on the road, I'll get you an update on that. Make sure you know we're fully functional. We've already ordered vehicles for next year too. So, just a heads up for you, we'll be bringing forward to you a grant to be approved for the flock cameras for 2025. So, as you know, the 2024 fee for flock cameras have been is paid for currently. So, Major Sturgeon has written another grant. And it's one of those grants, kind of like the BVP for the Bulletproof Vest grant, where if you write it, you kind of get it. And so he wrote this grant the other day and submitted it, and we pretty much are guaranteed to get a grant to pay the fee for 2025. So we're pretty excited about that. And so the grant's going to be a no match, and it's $37,500. So that's pretty good. St. Helens, just a little update with that. Actually went pretty well for as many people that go there every year. As you know, we only did actually 5 trespasses, and that was it for the whole time. And that was just 5 juveniles, and they were just fighting, and just had to move them from the property to stop that going on. So, no one from Riverside.
I wish I would have gotten trespassed and I could have gone home.
You can make that happen.
Yeah.
I could
Send me home
have.
next year on Friday afternoon. Yeah,
Yeah.
can't make any corn. Go ahead.
Yeah, you call me, I'll make it happen. Obviously, this fireworks season is upon us. Obviously, we have a directive that we've had in place now since 2022. I reached out to Katie to actually get out there a little ahead of this, so we could put some stuff on social media in reference to what we're going to do, how we're going to handle those things throughout the season. We did have a fireworks complaint last night, so we've already started. So we're trying to ramp it up to make sure that our guys and gals that are working out for the police department are out there. Make sure we get on this, because we only have certain days and hours that the people can actually have to use the fireworks. So I think Katie's going to put that out so everybody knows what that is again, so they can know what the directive is and the dates and times and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's all I have. You'll see a lot more tomorrow.
Questions for the chief?
Just the update.
All right. Well, thank you, both chiefs, for the support at the festival, and it was great to see both our fire and police staff walking the grounds, high-fiving kids, and having a good time, being good representatives of our city. So thank you, Frank. And we're over to the fire chief now?
Yes, sir. Chief
right.
Miller, over to you.
Okay, first of all, thank you for ratifying the contract last week that was brought before you. As Mr. Roush stated in the meeting, we were able to accomplish that in about 5 hours with one meeting. So that definitely shows the dedication of our staff and our officers in making the city a better place. It was a win-win. I've been on both sides of that table. It's never a comfortable place to be. We were able to bring them in line with the police contract, which is important for the guys. So, and then we won a lot of things too as well. So I was really excited about that. And the 3 individuals that represented our firefighting group did an outstanding job. So quick shout out to them. We've been really successful and aggressive with our part-time recruitment. We've brought on 7 new people in the last 6 weeks. We have 2 more that are in the queue right now that will probably get conditional offers within the next week. So once that's done, we only have 1 part-time opening. You see every Friday our average staffing. I already did it for tomorrow, and it's above 9. So as we showed earlier, when we're at 9 or above, things are a lot better for the residents of Riverside. So thanks to Mr. Roush for his support with all that. We started receiving the source water protection grant for the hazardous materials equipment. We've also got the BWC, which is firefighting hoods, firefighter gloves, and the gear dryer. So that's all part of our cancer initiative. We're rotating out stuff, non-permeable hoods and things like that. And lastly, with the new contract comes 2 new fire captains. It's going to be a change in our hierarchy for the organization, so we'll have a captain assigned to Station 5, a captain assigned to Station 6. Mr. Roush last week made conditional offers, and they both accepted, as we thought they would. But it's going to be Captain Ledford and Captain Gwynn. Both have significant tenure with the city of Riverside. Captain Ledford started in 2005, and Captain Gwynn in 2009. So they've been around for a very long time. We're lucky to have that caliber of employees with the city, and we look forward to their leadership and guidance in bringing our 2 stations up to where we know they can be. So that's all I have.
Questions for Chief Miller?
No, I just would like, both of you give the stats out on the report on Friday, but I've noticed in some of the other cities around us that those stats are going out on Facebook. And I would like to see our voting public to see how much our departments are used. And I feel like if the council agrees that it would not hurt us to get some PR for the guys that work hard, gals that work hard all the time. And some of the other cities are doing that and promoting how hard they work. And I
That
would
ball
like the
with,
manager to consider that.
yeah, that ball's already in motion. We have a new analytics program that we've been using, and we
Okay.
can actually send real-time data to the new city's website. So when you click on, it'll have up-to-date daily data of hotspots within the city, call types,
Yay.
concurrent calls. So it's forthcoming.
Thank you.
What is that program?
It's called Continuum. It's through ImageTrend, which that's our reporting software, but it's everything analytics, and I could probably
Is
send
there-
you a link to it.
It's real nice. Those types of programs are really, really cool because, I mean, it gives you, is it also police data or just fire?
It's just fire.
Okay.
There's a lot of crossover, though, with the injury crashes, overdoses, assaults, things like that, so.
Okay. I mean, if there was the appetite for it, that'd be nice to have something similar to that. If we could get it for PD, just to, like, residents have that type of data on, like, what type of calls are being reported in certain areas. I know LexisNexis has something like that, and I've looked at certain Riverside data. I just don't know if, like, we have proprietary information into that.
Yeah, and it's, excuse me, it's, that's absolutely something that I want to look into, not only for the real-time data, but also, you know, one of the things that Chief Miller did when he first got here was produce an annual report that started to kind of outline a lot of those stats and provide a template and a framework for us to continue reporting on stuff like this going forward. So I think between annual reporting that we can put out in like PDFs, so that folks have that annual check-in that they can compare, and also the real-time elements. Both of these things are things that I want to move forward with over the next 12 months, 18 months, and of course, in conjunction with Ms. Llewellyn and all the work that we're doing on the website, because being able to plug that in the new framework, I understand is, we have a lot more capability now, or we will shortly, than we do today. So that's due in large part to her effort as well, so.
And I'm real interested in all of that technology, but I'm also interested in the ordinary people like me to be able to see some numbers
Yeah.
that are more simplified.
Yeah, we'll start putting our monthly stuff out. That's not a problem at all for us.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Chief Miller. And we're going to go into public service, and is that you, Mr. Manager?
Yes, for the time being. Before we pivot to that, though, I do want to thank both chiefs and their staffs for all their help, leadership, and assistance with the St. Helens event. I know that it went very, very smoothly from my perspective, too, and that's due in large part to the proactivity and the responsiveness of them being on site and around there just to kind of help keep an eye on things. So thank you to both of you and to your crews as well.
Chief Miller did a spot check on the corn crib, which was very nice of him. He came over to make sure that everything was as it should be.
No open flames, things of that
Yeah, it was
nature.
great.
You know,
It was
right.
great.
Knowing the operator, you know, I'm
Well,
kind of
I-
shocked, but
While we're giving attaboys out, and I don't think the mayor would do this, but I drove by there Monday morning early, and you could not tell that place, I mean, or Tuesday morning, too.
Oh, by Tuesday
It
morning, it was all
clean.
gone. Yeah.
yeah.
Like never happened.
Monday at 7, it was all.
And hats off to the volunteers that make
That's all it
that
is,
happen.
volunteers.
So just to pivot into a quick update on public service. So I am
Very nice.
delighted to announce at this meeting that next month, we will be joined by Ms. Beth Moore, who is currently the Assistant Director at Montgomery County Environmental Services. She's accepted an offer to be our new Public Service Director. She will start with us on July 15th, and very excited to have her aboard. She has a wealth of experience not only at the county level, but at other city governments around us, Miamisburg being one. A lot of operational experience, has been out in the trenches, quite literally, for both roads and utilities. And I think brings a cultural perspective as well that'll be helpful, just some knowledge about how things have been done in other places that I believe we'll find useful and be able to apply pretty quickly. So very much looking forward to having her aboard. I've been working with Kevin and Andrea to compile a list of ongoing road projects. If you'll recall, about a year and a half ago, we had a page on the website that was sort of devoted to each road project and providing an update. In Ms. Bartlett's absence, we haven't had the oversight over that page that I would have liked. Unfortunately, just a capacity thing. So we are going to get together and work on a updated project list and then work with Ms. Llewellyn to get that out, both on social media and on our website. It's particularly relevant now. I know it's been a subject of conversation online, but also because we have to do so much dancing with other parties, ODOT and the county and everybody else, they will occasionally move their deadlines, and we have to respond to that. So there has been some dancing going on for the projects up on 201, 202, and 835 with the ADA ramps that involves the county and ODOT. And so we are going to let the dust settle on that a little bit, have a firm grasp on the timelines, and then republish some of that information. I know we've gotten some questions about the streetlights on Beatrice. I'm in the middle of trying to figure out what's going on between AES and Miami Valley Lighting. But we are going to crack that open and get to the bottom of it because it's been quite a long time since we've started that project, and it stalled first due to supply chain issues, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of what's going on there next. So I will continue to work on that. And the last piece is just that the street sweeper routes, we're expecting to start those in the next couple of weeks as well, so folks may see the street sweeper out in their neighborhoods going through the plats. This is one of the 2 times a year, I believe, we try to
I've already been in.
swing through. It's been a bit in process, so, at any rate. That's all I have on the service front.
All right, any questions on service? All right, moving right along into our work session items.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that, I am happy to introduce Mr. Sam Braun, who is with the Shared Resource Center. So Sam has a wealth of experience in financial, in a lot of different financial contexts. I know he's worked for the county as well as was a township finance director, and in his work with the SRC has advised schools, townships, municipalities on finances. We've been working with the SRC for really the last several months, in part because we've made all the adjustments that we've made to our budget and financial software, our day-to-day software, and we've now lived into 2-ish budget cycles, have some information about income tax under our belt. I believe that now is an appropriate time to start looking at trends. We have some firm data that's behind us that I think gives us a relatively solid foundation to start doing some forecasting, and Sam has been instrumental in doing some of that forecasting work for us. So I will let him introduce himself, and then he is going to walk us through a financial model and forecast that they've been putting together.
for having me.
Thanks for the time.
Yeah, of course. It's been our pleasure, and we've done this for a number of school districts, cities, and townships around the region.
This is the one downside of the way that our system
Technology is happening.
is that when your city manager forgets to unmute the microphone, and there's only one keyboard that can do it, you have to go back and unmute the mic.
They can probably hear me
So-
all right anyway, but.
Yeah, but just for the folks on
For
the
the
stream and in
recording,
the, and in the
yeah,
room, I
sure, no
wanna
problem.
make sure we got it up, so.
Right, so Shared Resource Center, we've been around a little more than a decade. I've been there about 5 years. Before that, I worked for the Montgomery County Auditor for about 15 years. So I've been a school treasurer, finance director, done a lot of these strategic plans. So what we've done over the last few months is working with the city manager, finance director, and meeting with some of the directors and senior staff. We've worked to develop a 10-year strategic financial plan to kind of give the township a look at where the finances are, where they're going, what some of the possibilities might be, what some of the threats are. And when we look at some of the major decision points, how to making different decisions, how's that going to impact the finances over the long run as well as the short run. So to get there, we went, and I'll try to drive on this. We went and got the finances from the past 3 years. So when we're, get used to using this mouse. So when we're in here, like I'll go to the fire page. And I realize it's a little small, but maybe you can see it better on your screen. But we have 2021, 2022, and 2023 in there. So those would show your actual revenues and expenses in those years. And we kind of we'll try to break it down. So we'll have this much from property taxes, this much from income taxes, this much from EMS fees, and then your other smaller accounts. And then same thing with expenses, and we'll break that down. Expenses from salaries, expenses from benefits, services, debt, and your capital expenses. So we started with that, doing the past 3 years, what actually happened. And then we've trended forward the next 10 years from 2024 to 2034. And then we did those trends. Some of it was just based on trend. Some of it may have been based on what your negotiated labor agreements are. Some of it would be based on meetings with directors, going through capital plan needs, looking at major projects that are coming up for the city. All those things are baked in there. So using that, we're able to develop a plan and make projections. And that's how we're able to arrive at some of the scenarios that I printed out for you in the packet. And we'll look at those in a minute. And I also want to point out a key to those scenarios are this key assumptions page. And that is where we have factors that could impact these numbers. So a big one would be like cost of living adjustment for salaries. So I think like right now, we have the next few years, we have a 6.33 in terms of the percentage increases. So, but if you were to change those numbers, it can drastically change some of the projections. For example, if we wanted to see, well, what would happen if we had a 10% raise one year, or what would happen if we froze wages for a couple years, we could put that in and see how that impacts the plan in the long term. Also, if we were going to go out and issue debt and borrowing for a major project, we could put that in, see how that impacted the plan. Or what we're going to talk about in a minute is if you have a levy that's coming up, we can game out the different scenarios versus renewing a levy, replacing a levy, increasing the levy, et cetera. So I'm going to take us over to the planning page, which is what you have printed out. So we're going to start with the first page, And this is, I'm calling it scenario one. But basically, the assumptions in here are just that we renew the police levy. So we're getting 5 more years, and we're keeping the police levy as essentially collecting the same level of revenue. No other new revenue in this scenario, no street paving. But we do assume in here that we're going to do, begin the direct bill service fees beginning in 2026. So that assumption's in here, which I believe you've already approved.
Yeah, that would be the what we talked about a couple work sessions ago, stormwater and trash.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, stormwater and trash. Yeah. So the bottom line, when we look at it, and I'm only, for simplicity here, I'm only showing the major funds and kind of summing those at the bottom, is that at the end of 2023, we had about a $10 million cash balance. In about 5 years, those funds would be at a $7 million cash balance. So we would deficit spend overall in this scenario, but we would survive about 5 years. At the end of 5 years, though, we're going to be in some trouble because our revenues are going to be flat and our expenses are always going up with inflation, with cost of living adjustments, with health insurance increases. So 5, 6 years from now, we would really have some tough decisions to make, either about new revenue or about potential cuts. And you can see when you get to, 2031, 2032, we're really out of money. And there would be some very difficult decisions there. So that's the scenario with
We have
just
a
a
question.
renewal.
Sam, we have a
Yes.
quick question.
Yes, please.
Sorry to cut you
Sorry.
off on your flow. So, first thing, to Josh, the stormwater utility, that would be in its own fund, right?
Correct.
Okay. And is that being lumped into the general fund, like your assumptions on?
No, it would be in the Public Works Fund.
Then where's that here?
It is, we're calling it Street Fund here.
The street fund?
Yeah.
So we don't have like a public works fund represented, like our current funding for public works. I mean, I guess that's coming out of the general fund, so we don't really.
Well,
have
it's
dedicated-
that one's a little bit tricky, and I feel free to jump in here too. But my recollection is that in Ohio, a part of it is that we have some funds that we can only spend on things like state highway that public service will draw from. We have the general fund where public service can draw for things like parks. The street fund here is for things like motor vehicle gas tax, other things that can support other general roadways. So the short answer to your question is there's not one public service fund.
Okay.
They draw from several in order to fund their budget.
Okay. So then is the street fund here, like the Ohio gas tax, highway tax, and that revenue that we're getting? Or are we seeing like a increase in stormwater utility funds in this model?
I believe the way this is structured is the street fund here would be primarily motor vehicle gas taxes,
Okay.
unless, Sam, you've got other things baked
Yeah, and
in.
it's being subsidized by the general fund as well.
Right. So the stormwater utility is being deposited into the general fund?
No, I think it would go into, well, we might have to set up a separate fund or cost center for it.
Right. So that's the thing, like, my concern with using this as like what we're basing off of, one, I'm not seeing a clear depiction of what the revenue is from the stormwater utility. And like, using the major fund balances as like, this is when we're gonna run out of money. I don't think that's a honest like representation for like the city as a whole, because that stormwater utility, we can't like come out of the piggy bank and say like, oh, I want to take that stormwater utility and pave a road with it or hire a firefighter. And the police and fire, I mean, a good portion of our income tax is like truncated just to police and fire. So
Right.
like, in a honest reality, the general fund could run out of money before like this stormwater fund. So that would be something I'd be looking into, is because.
Well, the stormwater fund would be self-sufficient. And the general fund is subsidizing all these other funds. So really, if you look at the bottom line of summing them, it does really work to give you an overall picture.
Okay.
Because none of them are self-sufficient. the street, the fire, the police, or or Right Point. So the general fund's subsidizing all of them, so, if we were to increase revenue to the police fund, then that helps the general fund, because then the general fund doesn't subsidize it as much. If we increase revenue to the fire fund, then that helps the general fund, because then the general fund doesn't have to subsidize it as much. So then you have more money for other items going
Yeah,
forward.
What might be helpful, Josh, or for the work at the Shared Resource Center, is seeing like specifically allocated money in this model, because there's a good portion of money that's going to go specifically to police that the general fund can't touch, a specific amount of money that's going to the fire fund that the general fund can't touch. And granted, yes, the general fund does subsidize both police, fire, and we don't have any dedicated revenue for public works or streets until we get the stormwater utility up and running, but also seeing that too and the dedicated revenue just for stormwater utility and kind of
So
not.
it is on here, if you'd like me to drive around and take a look at some of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be clear, what we're showing in this printout and on the planning tab, or what Sam's showing is the summary version of this.
Right.
The kinds of assumptions that you're talking about are baked into each tab of this
Okay.
model. So the level of subsidy that the general fund is giving to each of these other funds is already taken into account. And where that money can be spent is already taken into account. It's just very much in the weeds on each one of those tabs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I don't know how well you can see this on your monitor. So this is police. So we have revenue coming in from the levy and the property tax rollbacks. That's a big chunk. We have the income tax, which is being, in this scenario, we're splitting that 60% police, 40% fire, I believe. So those are your two main streams of revenue, and then you have some other miscellaneous. You get some grants certain years, and then you have, depending on whether we replace the levy or how we allocate the income tax, then you have your transfer from the general fund, which is going to vary based on those other factors, but we can't let the fund run negatively, obviously.
Right.
We have to do these things. And so the more we're transferring from general fund into these other funds, then the less is available, to do other things, issue debt, deal with facilities, improve Right Point, those types of things.
And the reason why I bring this up, it's not for my own good or just to like purposely get in the weeds for no reason.
No,
But
it's great.
a big assumption by our residents is, yeah, we voted for this income tax increase, but you're taking that 1.5% extra for me and using it to pave a road. And I think
No.
as a city, we need
That's
to
not right.
very clearly depict, like, this part of your income tax, this part of your property tax can only be for these purposes. And the city's not like pulling a cup and ball game of like, you're putting your money here, we're just switching it around and using it over here. That's existentially important that we're able to tell that
Yeah.
message.
Yeah, the 1.5% is all going to police or fire. And then the other 1% is going to the general fund.
And to the extent that I understand, agree, and appreciate where you're coming from, I think that the way we have started to try to tell that story is really through the budget process and using the narrative in the budget books to help explain these things. We will certainly continue to do that. For the purposes of this financial model, though, I think to Sam's point, this is all consistent with that. It's consistent with law, practice, and we are making assumptions in this model that allocate these resources correctly.
Yeah, and I've grouped a few funds together here just for presentation and simplicity, even though there may be separate pots of money. Like the permissive tax is grouped in with the street fund, even though that's very restricted. You can really only use that like between the curve paving. But that's good. Stop me anytime with a question. So back to this. Can I move to the second scenario, or do you have?
Yes.
I'm good.
Okay.
I think we're good on scenario A.
Kind of understand that's where we are with the renewal and not much else changing. So if we go to page 2 of your packet, scenario 2, This one is really just the same thing, only we're replacing the police levy. So the replacement, the way that works is that would move the effective rate up to be the same as the voted rate on this levy. It would take advantage of all the revaluations that have happened since the last time this levy was replaced. I think that was 15 years ago. So you'd be gaining about 2 mils of revenue. That's about $650,000 a year that would increase police revenues. And so by doing that, you take almost all the general fund, you make the police fund almost self-sufficient. And in the long run, what this really does, if you look at the bottom line here, is we're good for about 10 years in terms of being able to fund everything. We're not doing any extras here. There's still no street paving. It's still difficult. It'd still be difficult to start any other major projects that was self-funded, but we are getting a longer runway than the renewal levy would get us. And I understand that there'd be some fear here because it failed in the spring, and you only have one more chance with it. And I certainly understand all that, but there's a significant difference in the long-term outlook if you're able to replace it.
Sam, just
Questions?
one quick observation
Yeah.
there is that the numbers that you've used in this model for replacement are based off of the estimate that the county gave us last fall, correct? Basically, the initial,
It's my estimate.
Oh, it is,
actually,
okay.
Based on what the current values are.
Gotcha.
But I think if you ask for a county estimate now, it would be virtually the same.
okay.
Yeah.
And that's because we just, at last meeting, we sent off for those valuations that we
Yeah.
have to do before a ballot question, and we can
Yeah.
get together to compare notes once we hear back.
And they may give you a 95% collection rate.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm using 98.5 because historically, Riverside's always been at least that level of collection. Always a lot better than 95, usually between 99 and 100. So the number they give you might be a little bit lower, but it's the same ballpark. Estimate last fall, depending on where they were in their reappraisal, I'm not sure if that is still good or not.
Yeah, that's what we're curious
I'd
to
have
find
see it.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll have those numbers next week.
We should next week,
Yeah.
yes.
You have something, Zach?
I can look into this afterwards. I don't need.
All right, moving right along. Back to Sam.
If I could get the Excel data.
You said you're going to move
after-
along. You said you're going to look into it yourself, right?
Yeah, if you can send me the Excel data, I'll just look into this afterwards and not make this meeting 10 hours long.
Thank you.
All right.
Mike.
Yeah.
Back to the speaker.
Yeah, the calculations are in here. Anyway, you don't need to see that.
Chief's getting a fire truck in 2026. 1.2 million.
Nice.
Yeah, I think we have all capital purchases that are planned, that we believe are needed, are in here. So it is factored into the expenses of all these for police and fire and public works. We have a vehicle plans, and we've met with the directors about that. So, yeah, I believe there is a fire truck in there somewhere. Yeah. Scenario 3, and this would be replacing the levy and then also doing a new 3 mil levy, let's say for fire. Just throwing one possibility out there. This is the scenario where we would have plenty of money and could really do some extra things. Make police and fire funds almost self-sufficient. We could put more money from the general fund into actually doing some paving. In this scenario, it'd be about $250,000 a year in street paving, which is something we're not doing now. We'd also be able to easily finance the renovations for Wright Point. This is, of course, a lot easier said than done because we're talking about being able to pass, multiple levies in back-to-back years. But I just, wanted to show that as being kind of maybe a best-case scenario. And then the fourth one, page 4 in your packet, this would be maybe more realistic. We renew the police levy and then go for a new levy for a safety force next year. This is got a 3 mil fire levy projected, but it could be fire or police or something else, and it could be, in any range of millage. This scenario is also, very, we don't get the street paving, we don't get the street paving with it, but we get most of the other things, and we'd be able to comfortably, police, fire, public works, we've been able to do all the basic things that we need to do, and this would get us easily a 10-year time frame where we wouldn't have to ask for anything else. And then the final scenario, as I mentioned, there is rightly some fear about if we go for the replacement on the police levy and it fails. So this is that scenario, and basically we're in crisis within 2 to 3 years, where we're running out of money. The police fund would go negative within a couple of years. If you use the general fund to cover that, then the general fund would be negative in a couple of years, and we'd be in a lot of trouble. If it did fail, you'd immediately want to go out for a new levy. But of course, a new levy is a lot harder to pass than a renewal or a replacement. So just wanted to show that, because I know you're trying to make a decision about a renewal or a replacement on the police levy. So, other questions?
So Josh, we have a couple scenarios in front of us that were presented that we can obviously all dive into between now and a decision point, but with the legislation we passed last week, I believe, and I'd ask the clerk to also clarify, we have to make a decision by the beginning of August on renewal versus replacement?
Correct. At this point, I would anticipate another chunk of time for us to discuss this issue in particular during the July work session, and then to actually vote on what to put on the ballot at the July city council meeting. I believe that's the 18th.
Well, this is a lot of information. It's a lot to go over, but it's also very informative, and I think we're very appreciative to the Shared Resources Center's work on this. It's very eye-opening to see how things plot out 10 years plus. Questions from other members of council? Mr. Braun? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, we certainly thank you for your time, and thank you for
Yeah.
your continued work
Thank
with
you
our
all.
city staff, and we're very appreciative to have that partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that seems to dovetail right into our next topic of conversation for the
Yes.
manager.
It certainly does. Getting my keyboard back in order here. I just briefly, again, I think that one of the, and I'm happy to provide, some more detail about that model and get you access to Sam or any other expertise. If there are questions that come up, we can get deeper into the weeds on this. Having said that, what I think the main takeaway from where I'm sitting is that we're at a place where we have a solid base to make projections. When we make those projections, regardless of whether we get a renewal or a replacement, eventually we're going to run out of money again. Whether that's 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years, the question that we're going to ask you to put on the ballot in November by itself is not going to make our budget sustainable. So there's a larger story here. And what I want to be really clear about with you all and with the community is that we are, again, trying to demonstrate transparency and to explain what we know and to provide our best and most accurate estimate that we can provide based on what we know today about where we're likely to be in the future. And knowing what we know now at the current service level we are providing, we're not yet ahead of the curve as far as the budget goes. So there is going to be an important question on the ballot in November, one way or the other, There will also be important follow-up conversations that come after that, whether it's about existing service level or potentially more funding, or however we decide or the community decides and you all decide that you want to tackle some of those conversations. But again, I think as a starting point, it's important for all of us to just have a shared understanding about holding all things equal, where are we actually likely to end up over the next 5, 7, 10 years? And I felt that this would be a good way to kind of set the table for that conversation, so that ideally, it just provides that context as we go into trying to decide what to actually put on the ballot. So what I'll have for you next month is some more detail from the county about where these projections actually are for renewal or replacement, and we'll have some time at the next work session to sort of churn through that. And I know there are other conversations going on about, spinning up either a political action committee or some other groups to help have these conversations and engage voters, which actually is a good segue into the next item on the agenda. Mr. Miller's got a presentation for us about kind of the do's and don'ts of ballots and campaigns. So unless you have questions for me on any of this, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam.
Before we jump into Mr. Miller, are there, I guess, I want to make sure we kind of go in order, and it's something that, oh, you're good, Sam. We didn't have any other, I don't think we had any questions for you. You can go back out to the sweltering heat. All right, have a good weekend. As we talk about ways that the city council can be more proactive on the police levy front, something that the manager and I have talked about are ways that we, the 7 of us, can be more active and engaging in the community. And I think that's why the conversation with the law director is very appropriate to figure out, what are the do's and don'ts, but also making sure that we have all the proper information about how we can engage citizens, and if there's folks who want to be more helpful in the community, how do we help them get a little bit more organized if that's the case. So if there's no specific questions on the tax levy, we can jump right into Mr. Miller's presentation. We might go a little bit back and forth, but I just want to make sure we kind of know where we are in the discussion.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jim, feel free, and just point at me and I'll click the slides. Exactly, yes.
What happened to the point? Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Manager, Mr. Mayor, and council members. Thank you. It's a perfect segue into this topic. I know there was some discussion, I believe at a previous work session, about that very issue, how to engage, how to educate your constituents within the parameters of the legal requirements that exist. So I don't want to belabor the term restriction. I don't like that. This is more of a how you have opportunities to educate and how you have opportunities to provide factual information to your constituents so that the electors can make informed decisions in November. Click. I will not belabor these points, but just the objectives of this presentation is to be a resource to you all as elected officials, to review the legal guidance that's set forth by the agencies that monitor this activity, namely the Auditor of State. The AG has provided some legal opinions about public officials' activity in communicating about levies. And then there'll be some discussion of some particular examples of ways and opportunities that you can provide information to the voters and residents of the city that you represent. Go ahead. So all this boils down to one particular provision in the revised code that I'm sure everybody on the dais is aware of, that section ORC 9.03 prohibits a public official from providing communication within the scope of their public duties or using public resources that promotes the passage or influences voters to pass or oppose a levy or a bond issue. This is a statewide prohibition. It's nothing that the charter can overrule. This is something that is handled and enforced by the Auditor of State. There's a really nice quote from Auditor Faber that came out in 2023 that explains why this provision exists. And he says the bottom line is you can't use public time or public resources to ask the public for more of their own money. Essentially, when there's a influential communication to ask the public for the public's money, that needs to be done on private time with private resources. Go next. This, just to explain the real-world sort of implications of how this works, this is a rare, but it exists. It's a cautionary example of a scenario where Section 9.03 fairly recently was utilized by the auditor to pursue some penalties. This had to do with, it's our neighboring county, the Bellbrook Sugar Creek School District. This was a clear infringement upon the restrictions in the law. There was very specific resources of the public agency used to make promotional materials that urged for levy support, and it caught the attention of the auditor, and it led to the filing of charges in the Xenia Municipal Court. You can go to the next slide. And really, this is included not to be scary or not to indicate that this is a common practice. This is quite rare, but this was a clear example of the use of taxpayer money to ask the taxpayers for more money. And this is the whole reason that this prohibition exists. There are other ways, there are other opportunities to use partnerships, as was mentioned by Mr. Manager, with PACs or levy committees. We'll get into that in a bit. And also to use your public position to provide facts, to provide education to your constituents as to what will happen and what operations, what resources, what budgetary items will be available should a levy issue pass, and vice versa, what the residents can expect if a ballot measure for a levy fails. This is all perfectly acceptable, and in fact, there's some information in the presentation about that. That's a duty of a public official to inform the constituents how its tax money will be spent and what resources will not be available if that funding source is not there. Flip. Excuse me. Again, the whole point and the whole message, and I'll be hammering this throughout in all my advice. And again, this is not to overtake any individual advice that any council member would like to reach out to me for, but just a general broad overview. If there's a public dissemination of information in your role as an elected official, it must just stick to the facts. There'll be some specifics in a few slides, but explaining to your constituents the reason for a levy measure, the services a levy measure will support, the operations a levy measure will support. This is all not only appropriate and advisable, but it's a duty to inform the public what their money will be used for and what to expect if that revenue stream is not there. Go ahead. This just supplements the enforcement section of Section 9.03. It does provide that improper communications that try to influence a vote can have ramifications. And just, again, the moral of the story is the First Amendment, because, again, all of you have First Amendment rights to educate your constituents about issues relating to the operation of their government. There's possibly a duty that is read into that the electorate has to understand where their money is going. It's just how to do that and how it can guide you to do that in an appropriate way that gets the message across in a manner that is within the framework provided by law. So, all that being said, all the scary stuff being said, so what's permitted, what's not permitted? Well, there is guidance out there. And it's not just me. This is from other sources. So, again, we look back to the foundational statute in the state law, and it does allow for, as I alluded to, all of your First Amendment rights to, on your own time, without the use of public resources or on public time, to promote the passage, to participate in the political process. This is a little bit more geared toward somebody like Mr. Manager or a public official that has some more set hours, more set time when there can be leave taken, The auditor cautions that exercising those rights should be done on leave time when there is no use of public resources. As council members, you're in a unique position where you sort of are the embodiment of the legislative body of the community. So it's a little more tricky. We'll get into what you can do. The Auditor of State, in response to that case in 2023 with the school district, and a lot of the guidance has to do specifically with school districts because of the amount of levies that they pass, but it's clear that it applies to any public agency and any elected official. But city officials are permitted and advised to provide factual information to the public regarding the state of the city. The presentation that we just heard is a perfect example of that. Forecasting, budgetary models, predictions and forecasting about different scenarios. That is information that the public has a right to know and needs to know to have a say in determining what their vote will be on various issues. And again, personnel have the right to participate in that process, but it just has to be on their own time. Next slide. The guidance really has some specific scenarios that it envisions to help guide how you conduct public business. So city council member comments at a public meeting, just like today. Again, if it's limited to factual information as to the operational status of the city, the functions of the government, the financial models and forecasting, that's perfect. Promoting constituents to vote, reminding constituents when election day is, where polling locations are, the hours of that the polling locations are open. That is all appropriate. It's best if there's a promotion to vote in general, that occur consistently and not just around times when there are going to be levy or bond issues on the ballot. But it's a perfectly appropriate practice to remind your constituents how to vote, when they can vote, where to vote, et cetera. City communication on the website and social media. Of course, you have a very savvy communications manager that handles that, but it's the same type of guidelines. It's factual. It reflects the business that happens at the business meetings and work sessions. And again, reminders to vote in general, when election day is and polling locations. Those are all very appropriate messages to send to your constituents. And along those lines, if when you're expressing the information to your constituents as to how they can vote, where they can vote, it's also important that they understand that they can go to the Secretary of State's website for specific guidelines about things like absentee ballot, early voting. That has become very common and convenient way for voters to cast their ballot. It's important to know that it can get a little tricky when individuals want, or groups want to, the term is ballot harvesting, to gather together a lot of different absentee ballots. Big no-no. So if anybody is ever talking about the possibility of doing that, that is not permitted. Very limited exception if it's a close family member that has some inability or a condition makes it difficult to get to the polling location. But it's perfectly fine, again, to refer constituents to the Secretary of State's website for voting rules and regulations. That's all factual information. That helps your constituents to make their voices heard in an appropriate manner. City newsletters, flyers, and brochures, again, same principles apply to the communications on the website, to your discussion and comments at public meetings. Factual information, providing the operations and budgetary impact of a levy passage versus a levy failure is appropriate. Those are the factual realities of either scenario. It is advisable, and it is part of what your role can be to educate the different implications of each scenario. That is not an appropriate urging to pass or anything along those lines. That is a recommended action so that voters can make informed choices in November or beforehand when early voting opens up. So the auditor has indicated there are other ways that there can be influential communications that are disseminated. Those are through other committees such as PACs or levy committees. These rules and restrictions don't apply to those committees because they're private. They're privately formed, they're privately funded. Private money is being used to promote that messaging. So in that case, the sole purpose, those are formed to make influential communications to residents. So having levy committees make those communications that urge passage, that's perfectly within their scope because they're privately funded. Not to get in the weeds, but the auditor has provided some guidance about, if there's a levy committee that's formed, can the city lend its logo to the committee? And there are rules about that. If the city has to follow its policy, if one is in place for any other entity that wants to utilize the city's fair use logo. But again, anything like that would be reviewed by your law director before that would occur. And the auditor has also stated that comments about prior levies that have been successful, expressing gratitude to the community for passing prior levies, that is permitted. It's in context. It's similar to the context about reminding voters when and where and how they can vote. It should be a consistent messaging that doesn't seem to be flanked around when there's a levy issue on the ballot, just so there can't be any inference by anyone that it's implicitly meant to urge passage or influence the vote. But it is certainly your First Amendment right and your political speech and your role as a council member to communicate gratitude to constituents for the support of prior levies. It's just one of those areas to be intentional about. So all of the Auditor of State guidance being said, the Ohio Attorney General has opined about some of these issues as well, which provides us some more guidance from the AG's perspective. These particular AG opinions that I've referenced have to do with particular topics. Again, this is just to drive home that levy committees can be a real benefit and can do the influential work and messaging that a city council cannot do. This AG opinion, just in particular, it highlights that the whole purpose of these committees is to make those influential messages. So there is an avenue for that messaging to go out. It's not through council, but it can be through levy committees and PACs. This Attorney General's opinion from '99 is still valid. It's not been overturned or anything. It very much highlights that there is nothing inappropriate about discussing in a public setting at a meeting or with your constituents what can be expected if a levy does not pass. This is all based on public records. It's all based on financial forecasting. It's all based on operational need. It's not a scare tactic as long as the information is presented as to what services and operations would likely be affected by a levy ballot measure that does not succeed. That is, again, within the electorate's right to know. What will happen to the tax money if if the measure does pass, and what operational and budgetary implications will occur if the levy does not pass. And finally, I believe this is the last AG opinion. This has to do, again, with kind of the intersection of levy committees and a public body. The levy committee acts independently with private people on private time, with private funds. This AG opinion sort of outlines the relationship with the city. There are certain just blanket prohibitions, no storing of levy committee materials on city property, those kinds of restrictions. But this outlines how a levy committee can use a city facility, for example, a conference room, to conduct a meeting. Again, as long as any other group is able to do the same thing. And the policy is applied to allow the levy committee in, just as any other group would. That's perfectly fine. Again, it's just, there has to be intention about making sure that there's not special treatment or the imprimatur of the city council is provided to that levy committee. We can go to the final slide. So to wrap all this up, really, again, in all caps, when in doubt, factual information will never lead to any problems. And that is your constituents' right to know. Any questions or concerns, this is in your materials, and you can reach out to me at any time for specific questions and specific guidance. The quote from Auditor Faber, do it on your own time, on your own dime, that kind of harkens to levy committees and PACs, really can be a supplemental source of promoting this messaging. And again, I don't want to frame this as restrictions as much as what are your opportunities to inform your constituents and how to be proactive about getting the message across in terms of what will financial, operational, budgetary implications of any scenario, whether it be renewal, replacement, a failure. All of these scenarios can and should be communicated to the constituents, and if it's in a factual manner, it's going to be perfectly appropriate. So I am happy to answer any questions right now that may come. I see, yes, Councilmember Fry.
Did you directly answer, if you did, and I missed it, I apologize. When are we on our own time?
That's a great question, and I did not explicitly answer that because it's a little murky. So it's clearer for an employee of council that's on leave time, has submitted vacation, is off the clock, so to speak. The guidance is, from the auditor and the AG, is a little bit more fuzzy for an elected official, for a council member. You really kind of always are, in some fashion, based on the context of what you're doing, the function that you're at. If you're speaking about city business, really as a council member with that, with the imprimatur is the word I keep thinking of a council member, then really this parameter applies. When you're at the grocery store and you're not doing anything related to a city function, it's contextual. It's a little more, that's your own time. It's just it's very fact specific. So my best advice is to kind of consider yourself always a council member when you're in office. That's the safest route. Now, and we can talk about, again, you have First Amendment rights too when you're not engaging in your public official duties, but as a council member, it's less clear when you're not engaging in official duties because you're an elected legislator for the city. So you're kind of always looked at in that role.
I have another question.
Yes.
So oftentimes when we're taking a vote, we may give our rationale for why we're voting the way we are. And in the context of a levy, we may be saying, this is why I think that we need to have, put this to the voters, which is very opinionated, or, it can be. Is there like, first of all, is that okay? And second of all, is the line between once we've passed it, then we should stop opining about it?
So I think to answer the first part of your question, I think it's always, from a legal perspective, beneficial for your constituents to understand why their elected officials are voting in a certain way. So, for example, when the determination is before council as to what exact type of levy to put on the ballot, explaining factually your reasoning for voting a certain way, explaining, okay, the forecasting we've seen, and you'll know more information when the county auditor provides the current valuations. But explaining those facts, yes, can be opinionated, but it's providing factual context to why you're supporting putting that measure on the ballot. It's not improperly urging passage, it's just saying, from a legislative perspective, I, as a council member, see a operational need that will be filled by this levy, or explaining whatever rationale you have. That's perfectly appropriate and helps your constituents understand why you're voting in a certain way. Once it's been determined via resolution to certify to the auditor, I'm sorry, the Board of Elections, that there will be a ballot measure, you've kind of already explained, council has spoken at that point, it's been determined there'll be a measure placed on the ballot. Then you really can continue the factual messaging, and you've expressed an intent to place that ballot measure on the ballot, so it's up to the electors at that point, and you can just continue providing your factual information as to why you voted that way, what services would be benefited, what implications may be expected if there's failure. So it is somewhat of a line, but as long as it's factual, and it's very clear from the guidance that it is advisable to indicate what will happen in either scenario so that voters can make an informed choice. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
So, we're paid monthly, yearly, so we're basically on the clock 24/7, okay? Unlike school board, who gets paid by their meeting monthly, so they're only on the clock during their meetings or if they're at an official board situation. So we're in a worse situation, less palatable situation in that we should not be part of a committee that says, is that what you're saying? Is that the bottom line?
That's the safest route,
Okay.
yes. In fact, the auditor guidance says, trying to parse out when you're quote-unquote off the clock and, for example, participating in a levy campaign committee, you kind of do it at your own risk, because that's exactly right about school boards. They are different in that regard, that there's a little bit more of a discerning when the elected official is on duty versus off duty. That doesn't apply to city council.
So the bottom line is, we should help. If the school's going to have a school levy, then we should go be their committee, and then the school board should come and be our committee.
But how does this differ from if a state representative who's on salary 365 days a year goes on TV and says, vote no on issue 1, vote yes on issue 1? Like, they have the same level of constituents, state representatives, state senators have the same, they have a broader jurisdiction of constituents, and they're advocating on a policy or a statewide levy
I'm not
issue.
disagreeing.
So I don't see how.
I just wanted, I'm not.
I mean, I'd be
interested in
filing
going to
suit
court.
every other day if I went and just started going after every statewide elected that advocates for a ballot initiative that I'm voting on.
Right.
So I mean, how does that differ?
That's bless you. That makes sense, and I think the differences are kind of in the weeds about when you look at the bottom of those commercials, for example, on television, and paid for by, and then there's usually a PAC or a committee, and it's endorsed by the candidate. I don't want to say it's completely identical.
Right.
So there are some nuances when there's an endorsement by a candidate of a issue that is paid for by a PAC or a levy campaign committee. From a broad perspective, it's safer
Right.
for you as council members to keep to factual messaging.
Well, I mean, yeah, the Ohio Revised Code says that you can't disseminate false information about a ballot initiative. So, I mean, that's kind of governing, but I mean, I know the city of Dayton, their electeds were very on the front line about their recent ballot initiative, their levy or income tax renewal, what they did in November. They came in front of the board, or the Democratic Party asked for the entire Democratic Party's endorsement on the issue, and that was the mayor coming in that capacity. So, I I mean, they had a PAC set up for that. So I'm assuming that we'd be within our right to set up a PAC and kind of go on the front lines and like hand in hand with our police who are not on duty, asking for this levy to pass, right?
PAC activity is not at
Okay.
all restricted by this.
Perfect.
And that's how we've done it in the past. We
By
did not.
having a PAC established.
Yeah.
I'm confused.
Yeah, so what's the difference between the levy committee and the PAC?
Well, if I would think that a political action committee would become the levy committee.
Yes.
It wouldn't be led by any of us. It would be led by folks in the community, maybe folks who are off duty that might be employees. They would maybe get guidance from us. But, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, I don't think that a political action committee, for the purposes of passing a levy in our city, would not have any of us as members, listed members.
Correct. And I'm sort of using those two terms. They're really the same thing.
It's the same thing.
A levy committee would just be a sort of a type of a PAC. So I'm starting to be confusing. A PAC and levy committee for the
So
purposes
we-
of this
we
is all the
couldn't-
same.
We couldn't really participate or be part of a committee to do that because of our situation being on council.
Well, we've done that before, and the.
If they ask you to do something, yes, but you really shouldn't sit on the actual PAC itself.
Okay.
Right, and that's where the auditor guidance is, kind of says proceed
Just
with
because we've
caution.
done
Just
it
make it very
before.
As long as they're
clear.
Doesn't
funding
mean we
something
couldn't
or
do it
funding
now.
activity, then yes.
Well, yeah,
Right.
but we still, the employees have off-duty been involved in
Yes, oh,
forming
yeah,
support.
Yeah,
off duty, and
that's-
they're, but
that's
they
what I
have
said.
specific hours. So, yeah, I understand that.
Well,
What
there-
I'm concerned about is the fact that, I mean, I've been in political, I mean, I was on the first committee to help pass the levy. Now, I wasn't on council at the time, so I understand all that, but I think the problem is the way we've done things in the past, we would spearhead it and make sure that the PAC happened and all that. But I think the answer is, these rules may have been on the books back then, but they're being more vigorously enforced now, and we have to be careful that we don't put ourselves in a situation where we're
Well, the
gonna get
rules
sued
have
or.
always been there
or-
because I went to the ethics committee and I won an issue during an election.
Well, but the
So
current state attorney
rules have
general.
always been there.
But the state attorney.
The current state
gen-
attorney general has had a much more aggressive interpretation of said rules,
I agree.
as
And
is
that's
evidenced by our
what,
neighbors.
that's what we're running into.
I think
So-
it's, yeah, an enforcement and scrutiny has heightened, become zealous.
Did you have something, Brenda?
Yes. Donating our personal funds to a PAC, where would that fall?
That is addressed by the auditor, and that, if it's very clear that they're private funds, and it's done, on your own private time, that is okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mr. Miller, you're always available for specific questions.
Yes.
As these come up.
I want to make sure that just because I'm sort of presenting the broad topic, I
Yeah.
don't want to make that sound like I would be unavailable for one-on-ones or follow-ups at any time.
Yeah, I would
So
say,
I'm
don't
here
feel like
for
you,
it.
if you didn't get your question answered today, that there's no other opportunity. Go ahead, Zach.
So if you have a police or fire, a police officer or firefighter who is exempt, not hourly, they wouldn't be able to do it at all, like, because they're exempt and they work all the time.
It would be similar to the situation where you all are sort of representing the city all the time.
Okay.
It's just more easily concrete for someone that has a set schedule.
Right.
'Cause the auditor's specific advice is take leave time or do it off-duty.
Yeah.
That's difficult when you don't really have that type of a schedule.
Right.
I mean, we could just move to get, like, I don't know, create ourselves a set schedule to get paid by me, well, we can't.
Well, right, but I think the spirit of the
Yeah,
regulations are.
make decisions you can defend.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to express gratitude, thank
I
you.
do,
This,
yeah.
this type of clarity has been very helpful.
Okay, thank you. That was my goal, to be proactive and provide something that you could use. So-
All right, and these will be ongoing conversations, I know.
Okay, thank you.
Take our
Thank you.
frustrations out on the state who makes this overly complicated for no reason.
Well, there was some overreach. That's why they enforced it more heavily. Pendulums swing back and forth. That's how they work. And back to the city manager. Speaking of pendulums, Josh, it's you, bud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I
All
appreciate
right.
that. Speaking of pendulums, I'll toggle back and forth between these other things that we need to show. All right, so the next item on our agenda is the fee schedule. So with us this evening is Ms. Taryn Smith. She is our new community development technician to speak with you briefly about some updates to this document, which was in front of you just a couple of months ago. And Taryn, I'll turn it over to you.
Jim is a lot taller than I am. I know some of you. I was a previous intern, so I came back and am now the community development technician. When I first started in May, I was asked to review the previous draft that you guys had looked at of the fee schedule that had seen some revisions, and then I familiarized myself with some of the notes that you guys gave and recommendations for future revisions. So this is a draft taking those notes into account. As you can see, there's what the fee is, how much it is, and then that third column is the one that was edited, and it gives kind of a little description about why the fee might be imposed, along with what statutory authority goes with that, with a link to some of those. So whether that's our code of ordinances or Ohio Revised Code, or if it's just a city policy that's been passed within a department. So if you guys have any other recommendations, I'm happy to hear them.
And I think your thought was, as long as council thinks that this format is a little more helpful, to basically expand this for the rest of the fees that were listed on the schedule.
Yeah, so this is just a mock-up of what one of the pages would look like before we went ahead and did the whole 15-page document, so you guys could give some feedback.
And again, this would be sort of something of a placeholder document in the sense that for the time being, we could get this formatted in a PDF, put on the website. Folks can go and download it until we're at a place where it can become its own web page or a more flexible resource. It'll just kind of tide us over in the meantime.
All right, questions for Ms. Smith?
So we're giving feedback on the format then?
Yes, yeah.
Looks fantastic.
Okay, we'll have time to review this and push any comments or compliments to the city manager to give to Taryn.
Perfect.
Anything else? Thank you, Ms. Smith, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Mayor, I believe Mr. Phil Downing with the Downing Group is here with us this evening. So I believe Mr. Downing's been here before. It's probably been a couple of months, if not maybe a little bit longer.
Several times. I think I've had the opportunity to be in front of most of you, and good evening, Mayor, Council.
Welcome.
So we've asked Phil to be here in part because the Downing Group has helped us on a number of economic development fronts, but in particularly of late, they've helped with the Community Improvement Corporation. And so what will be in front of you at the next meeting next week is authorization for me to enter into an agreement with the Downing Group to help get the CIC to bridge the gap so that we can actually get it spun up and capitalized and to the next phase. And I will let Phil talk a little bit more about that in detail.
We've referenced a lot of, actually, I came on a great night because, I got a spreadsheet presentation, got an ethics presentation. This has really been a highlight for me. Got fire and police. I mean, I hit the jackpot here. And I do love a good spreadsheet. Josh knows that. So, and we've done a lot together on the Right Point building, just to familiarize you with some of our work. We, under the Jobs Ohio grant, along with the city, put together that report. And I think it's actually going to be the foundation for a variety of real positive things. We've already seen some very positive feedback. I believe you've told them about the grant that we were able to receive. Is that-
Yes, and incidentally, another item we'll have for you next week is we received a $300,000 Brightening Ohio grant for the light poles and fixtures at this building.
Yep.
So that's part of a slate of projects that we will be working on.
I hope they go faster than Miami Valley Lighting.
I will do everything in my power.
I'm sorry, I had to throw that.
Well, I think we were lucky because this was one of those grants that they opened the window for about 15 days. And literally it was December 1st through December 15th. And I think it was December 13th, before everybody was going on vacation, I'm talking to Josh and I'm going, okay, I'm going to put this grant in. You know, are you all right with this? So it worked out well. And I think one of the things that really supported it was the work that we had done previously under the Jobs Ohio activities that really spoke to, you know, one of the line items you saw in the previous budget, which was the right point kind of performance and how we could actually increase the performance level of that building, translated decrease costs. And so we've looked at a variety of things, energy activities. So what does all this, you know, have to do with the CDC, or the CIC, excuse me? The CIC is actually a great public-private partnership vehicle to help economic development, community development, and housing. We've utilized this tool under ORC 1724 is the authorization. Everything is been in place. The CIC, as you all recall, was dormant for a number of years. It's ready to be reworked, which means filing the new articles of incorporation. Mr. Miller can certainly help us in that area. We've got track record of doing this for a variety of communities across the state in the past 5 years. So we've got kind of a checklist of the forms. We'll work with city manager, law director to get all those taken care of. CIC, as I understand it, has been established in terms of its constituency for the board. So we'll take those Director Holt, we'll take those names, obviously put them into the legal documentation that needs to be filed with the state, get all of that spun up, and be ready to start, you know, implementing activities that the city wants to see take place. So anything from, you know, how do we make the buildings more appealing, more cost efficient? You know, there's a variety of energy programs that are available right now that are really unique because of the past. The cities in general, hospitals, nonprofits, really could not participate in the money back on energy rebates the way that the IRS structured things. Currently, there is a direct check back to the city. So this extends for the next couple of years. I know Josh has got other folks working on that too. That's kind of where some of these things intersect. We can also use the CIC as a conduit to bring funding in. So as we look at not only the right point, but center of flight and other property aggregation up and down Huberville, that will really transition that whole area, set the table for development. That's one of the things that community improvement corporations are really used for. You know, aggregate property, get it into the right setting, then go out and put it into a development deal. Sounds real lofty, real easy. We're here to help set the table for this, get it up and operational, and help you drive it where you want it.
So the scope of this agreement is, as Phil said, basically to take a swing at putting together the initial budget for the CIC, a plan for how to capitalize it, what a portfolio of properties could look like, any of the other filings for 501c3, those sorts of things. It's, I believe, a $25,000 agreement that would span the next several months to get that off the ground and then position the CIC for the next step, whether that's contracting out for an executive director or or those kinds of services, somebody to help carry it forward sustainably into the future. So we will have that authorization in front of you at the next council meeting.
All right, questions for the manager or for our guest? All right, thank you for the time and thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
And then the very brief city manager updates.
Message received. No,
Now, Josh,
I will be as
quickly.
brief as possible. So the first thing, just very, very quickly for you all, at the prior work session, we had some discussion about creating a donation request form for organizations that may want to ask council for a donation. I have mocked this up. Actually, I should give credit where credit is due. Ms. Couch at the front desk really took point to help mock this up, and did a pretty good job. So the plan, as long as you are comfortable with this approach, is to ask for just some basic information about the organization and its overall annual budget, the amount that they're requesting from council, and then to have them provide a description about why and how they want to use those funds, and then to basically sign and certify that they're representing the truth. And then this would be the form that I would bring to all of you to say, here's the request, here's what they're after, any other questions or information, and we can go from there. As long as there wasn't anything that I forgot to ask her to put on this form, I thought this captured our conversation and just wanted to be sure.
Should we put anything on there as far as if they have a affiliation with like a 501,
Like a 501c
yeah,
status?
That
Yeah.
or a school fund or something like that?
I would say a box we could check that they're registered with the state as a 501c3 or a governmental agency or something like that.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we know who we're talking,
And
who we're
if,
dealing
and if
with.
so, should they put their ID number or whatever? on
That
there?
should be pretty standard, I'd say.
Tax ID, we can do
Yeah.
that. I'll add that. All right. Anything else form-wise? Okay.
Looks good. Glad we have it.
We will get that out, and then I'll get that over to the Riverside seniors after it's been finalized. We will have the supplemental, the mid-year supplemental will also be in front of you at next council meeting. The gist of that is that the bulk of it actually allows us to move some money around the budget. Specifically, the general fund made an advance into the public infrastructure fund that we have to return, so there will be appropriation letting us move that money back. We'll have a full explanation and a detailed table, as we did with the last supplemental, inside your packet, and if you have any questions on that, let me know. But again, the bulk of it is accounting moves for housekeeping purposes. We do have some additional appropriation for grants. Chief Miller referenced, like the BWC grant. So some of the additional expenditure appropriation will be like our local match for those grants. But it's relatively modest compared to the accounting maneuvers that we have to make. I've had a couple council members ask about the possibility of resurrecting a newsletter. Ms. Llewellyn and I have had a conversation about that. I think it's probably, I don't want to speak for her, but I think it's probably feasible to bring sort of a one-page, front and back, so a two-page format, to bring that idea back to life with relatively quickly, in part because we could sort of concentrate on some of the key content elements that would need to go out on that, and maybe do that on a, I don't want to speak for you, Katie, quarterly or every 6 months basis. It was quarterly before, as I recall. Having said that, I didn't know if, I just wanted to open the floor, if there's any preferences, thoughts, concerns, comments you have on items that you would like to see go into a newsletter sooner rather than later, or format, other ideas that you might have, we can take that feedback and start to run with it. I don't know if anything occurs to you now. I'm happy to make more time to talk about this later on next month as well, if that's helpful.
I think having updates from our committees would be a great use of highlighting the work that's being done by the citizens on a volunteer basis, and it would really focus, I think, that communication from them. So.
Vacancies as well, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
And I would say that's good homework for all of us too, as things come to mind in the next week or so, to make sure that Josh and Katie are aware of those ideas and see what we can. I think there's plenty of content to get out. It's just a matter of how do we best deliver it and how do we do it in a manner that gets the message across but doesn't oversaturate but also doesn't underinform.
Exactly.
And good thing we got good people on that.
Facts. This is true. So we will run with with that idea and some other things that we've been ruminating with, and I'll make some time at a future work session to touch base on probably like an outline or a draft of what that could look like. Finally, I've also had a couple folks ask on council about a council retreat. I do think that's a good idea. It's been a while since we've had one. At this point, my suggestion would be to, given that we're coming up on summer and vacation season, and then we'll pretty much immediately slide into budget season. My thought at this point is to recommend that maybe we target a time in early, mid-September, because that will be far enough along in the budget process where I'll be able to give you some ideas about how things are shaping up. We can certainly discuss annual goals, the usual housekeeping kinds of items. But also, if there are conversations or other questions that you have about police levy-related matters, it's kind of getting closer to that election timeframe as well. But again, just opening the floor for feedback. If you have preferences about timing, day of the week, format at this point, open to any suggestions that you have.
Okay.
I prefer summer.
It's warmer.
Well, it's just, yeah, I have more freedom.
I know.
Summer.
I do not.
Well, we'll kick around ideas. And
Yeah.
That's
I think
fair.
we can, between now and your time frame, I think we can get to where we need to be.
Yeah, and at this point, if you have ideas and thoughts and they just come up to you, get in touch with me, text, email, call, or during any one of our meetings, let me know. I'm going to start working toward that, though, as long as none of you have objections, which it sounds like you don't. So I'll keep it moving. And that's all I have.
All right. We'll move into council member comments, and we'll start with Ms. Lomatch.
Well, I already thanked St. Helens for the success and how beautifully cleaned up the place was. I was very, very impressed with how it looked immediately after. So, and I've already made my statement about the flags, for Flag Day and 4th of July, and they put them out all year long at the appropriate times, and it's really, really, I've seen more go in my neighborhood, so
Mhm.
push them up for the JCs.
Mr. Brown, welcome back.
Thank you. No comments from me, thank you.
All right. Is it as hot up here as it was in Orlando?
It was about 102 when we left, so
Well,
it's getting there.
is that all?
Yeah, that's all.
Mr. Joseph?
I have nothing.
Okay, I'm going to go last because I have a thing I need to announce. Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Police Fire, for all the work this past weekend. Thanks to St. Helens and everybody that volunteers for the festival. Honestly, it's a highlight every year for our city. It's a nice activity that not only kids and people in our city get to kind of participate in every year, but I know it's a nice fundraiser for the for your group, and it's just a nice highlight for our city. So thanks for that, and I think that's all I really have. So.
Ms. Fry?
I want to give a shout out to Project Riverside and their annual festival that's
This
happening
Saturday.
this weekend. I believe it's like from 10 to 4,
10
I
to
think.
4.
They work so hard for our community, and every year they outdo themselves, and I'm very excited to see what they have in store this year, and to see that festival grow. So yeah, just would ask that everyone give them all of your support. It's a little fledgling little festival, but I think it's they do a lot of great work in the community.
They have good food trucks.
Oh, Aurora Park, I
Aurora
think.
Park.
Yeah.
Aurora Park.
Yes.
Right, they have great food trucks.
They do. One more thing. Last week, during our discussion of proposed charter amendments, the 2019 Riverside mayoral election was referenced in a hypothetical matchup where the outcome would have been different than what actually occurred. In the interest of transparency, I just feel compelled to correct what was said. I don't believe it was made on purpose, but I prioritize operating with good faith, and I want to maintain that good faith. So to be clear, the mayor won that race with a clear majority of 52% of the vote. He would have won that race under any voting method. And that is all.
Was it 53?
Yes.
I rounded wrong.
You round it down? What do you do at restaurants?
That is all.
Mr. Denning?
Yeah, and to be clear, I was just going hypothetical, and I had not looked at the numbers, and clearly, Pete would have won, any way it would have gone. I just wanted to point out some facts. But I also want to point out the fact that I voted to put that on the ballot. That doesn't mean that I support voting, ranked choice voting, because if it's this confusing to those of us that have sat through multiple things, I'm not sure folks are really going to be able to, it's a positive thing. So make your own choice, do your own homework, and make a decision. But I do believe that the community has the right to make the decision on whether we vote the way we do, as it is now, or whether we go to ranked choice voting, and that is the reason that I voted, the main reason that I voted for putting it on the ballot, is so that folks have a chance to make that decision, not necessarily that I support it. Thank you.
The only thing that I'll add is that there was information that was passed along to me that I shared with the council members earlier today that I got right before our meeting started. I won't belabor the point, but we're going to have the director and executive director of the Montgomery County Board of Elections joining us at our next council meeting. There are hard copies of the letter that Mr. Resbeck sent to me to share with you guys to have further discussions about about ranked choice voting, and it may lead to.
Walmart has a map.
It was a Walmart ad. It may lead to further discussion or action by this body. So we will see. I want to thank the community for supporting St. Helens. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. This is my 45th festival, and I'm only 44. So I've been to a lot of them. And I also want to mention that we were talking about Flag Day and the point behind the flag and the reasons behind the flag. And then we referenced 4th of July. I also don't want to go without mentioning Juneteenth. Juneteenth is right around the corner as well. And that's really the day on the calendar where we celebrate all Americans having the same freedom to point to as something that belonged to them too. So because we're not going to call an executive session about the letter that we received, and I don't want to talk about it before we have other folks to come in and talk to us, I would just say to my fellow council members, this is something that I received from the director after the vote we took last Thursday, and they certainly have an interest in coming to speak to us directly about the capabilities of the Board of Elections for Montgomery County concerning our desire to possibly change our voting method.
Would we be able to schedule an executive for next week regardless of?
I don't know that this falls under the category of what we can discuss. We have to discuss it openly.
I don't believe it's
Under
one
the
of the
guise of pending legal action.
You want Jim to have Jim has a copy of this also?
I don't know that I've seen that.
Yeah.
Here.
I
Here.
emailed to everybody who was during the meeting because I got it at
Here's
5:35.
another. Here, go ahead and pass mine down so Jim has it and Josh has it.
Why don't we get some clarity about whether
Yeah.
that's possible, and then we'll let you know.
I have the
Go
same
ahead.
question.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
want to rush
I
an
don't know if
answer
Josh has
right now.
That's fine. Yeah, and Zach, just so you know, I asked the same question if we could discuss it in executive, and the clerk and I were unable to determine if this specifically falls under one of the 7 categories where we can convene privately without having the discussion publicly. So I'm not trying to force a discussion out in the open to surprise anybody or blindside anybody or embarrass anybody, but this is something we're going to have to discuss next Thursday with the information that they're going to provide for us. So I just want to, in the interest of full transparency, I don't know that we can go to executive about it, but Jim will be able to advise us on that next week. All right.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. And we are adjourned at 7:44 PM. And Andy gets out before 7:45.